Awesome. Thank you so much for coming today for our Textbook Transformation Grants RFP review. I am just going to run through the basics of the RFP, and then I'm going to take you into the actual online application for both. So what we'll do is just go through a basic review of the guidelines that you need to know, just kind of the basic rules that have to do with funding and applications. And then we'll go into how these look within the programs, because this is a lot better on Skype than it used to be back at WebEx. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a chat message. What I'm going to do is make sure that I can see the chat on a different window. There it is. And then I'll just run this from here. Great. Okay, so if you know, if you've had experience with textbook transformation grants before, you know that it's all about transforming a course. So a lot of grants out there have to do with open educational resources creation. Some of them have to do with just straight adoption, but these are a little bit more open-ended. It's about your course and changing it from being based on a commercial textbook to being based on open educational resources and other no-cost resources and low-cost resources to students. That can include library resources. It can also include free resources on the web, platforms that support OER. So, for example, a mathematics low-cost homework platform that works with OpenStax. That also works for textbook transformation grants. So the request for proposals you've already seen in the RFP for round 12. That one is a completely new lead platform on Word, as opposed to putting it right on the website and then translating it to Word. You're able to navigate the whole thing, and from there you're able to tell the timeline. There are multiple tables now. We couldn't do that on the website, so that works a lot better. The RFP has some of the wording from previous rounds, but we're really trying to illustrate more clearly the different requirements of each category, why the categories exist, that type of thing. So when it comes to the funding levels, you may have already read all about this if you've read through the RFP, but we have a standard scale transformation, a large scale transformation, and mini grants, which are a little different. So generally, standard scale transformations are for smaller teams that have a course that they would really like to transform. It's not a gigantic department-wide endeavor most of the time. And for these, there's $5,000 maximum per team member towards a course release, towards course overload pay. It depends on the institution, with $10,800 as the maximum award. And $800 has to be in there for travel and overall project expenses. That's $800 total. That's to make sure that everyone can attend the kickoff meeting, and then after you're done with that $800, it can be used for any overall project expenses. So I often will get emails from grantees, and they'll be like, I'm thinking of getting this Adobe thing so that I can create this thing for my class, and would it be possible to transfer this part of the budget over to this part of the budget? That's all within your institution. The $800 is for overall project expenses. Most people are not going to need that much if they are going out to Macon, especially if you're at Middle Georgia State. So that is a little bit more about just whatever it is that you need past the point of travel. Large-scale transformation is just like the standard scale, except that it's for a bigger team. So there's $30,000 maximum award, but it's the same maximum amount per team member and the same amount for travel and overall project expenses. So when it comes to the kickoff meeting for large teams, not everybody has to attend. It would be kind of infeasible for an entire department to leave all at the same time in the middle of the week. So what we are looking at when we have a large-scale transformation is for at least 2 team members to attend. So the requirements are basically the same, and therefore the travel and overall project expenses stay the same. But those are the differences between standard and large. They're both the same type of textbook transformation grant, but they are different in the maximum award. in order to ensure that there's more people on the team. Mini grants are different because we are not looking at just transforming a course with a mini grant. We're looking at revisions to existing materials, the creation of new ancillary materials to support OER that are already out there. This is a bit of a different project than if you had a textbook transformation grant itself. And because of that, they have a completely different type of application. But it's 4,800 maximum award and 2,000 max per team member, 800 for overall project expenses. You do not have to attend an in-person kickoff, so it doesn't have to go towards travel when it comes to mini grants. And the 2,000 max per team member, you don't have to have at least 2 people on the team. This can be an individual revision project. But in that case, it's still 2,000 max per person. So you would wind up with a maximum of 2,800 if you have a one-person revision or ancillary materials mini grant. So that funding is a little bit different from textbook transformation grants when it comes to the standard and large scale, because mini grants are meant for particular actions as opposed to a big giant transformation. For grant categories, the no or low cost of students' learning materials is the big catch-all for all of them. But when it comes to the other categories, we're doing it a little differently this time around. And so I want to show you that a bit over here in, let's see, if I can go into Info Ready Review. I'm going to have to log in here and just go right into my drafts because this is still on the burner over at Georgia Tech. We are nearly done with it, but I wanted to give you a bit of a preview here. So in the proposal details, when it comes to grant categories, you do not have as much as they used to. The type of grants are no or low cost to students, specific core curriculum, scaling up OER, and gateways to completion. The no cost and low cost to students is the catch-all category for a standard scale or large scale transformation grant. That just means you are replacing a commercial textbook with no or low cost materials. That's going to be nearly every grant, and then the other 3 are special ones that dictate a bit of priority when it comes to selection because they serve different parts of the ALG strategic plan or the USG strategic plan. So specific core curriculum courses, this is us looking to address every core curriculum course within the USG's list of core curriculum courses. Scaling up OER is about a specific type of project where you've had a standard scale project before and you want to move that to department-wide. Scaling up OER allows for that type of category to exist where, yes, this project has been done on your campus with this course, but you're expanding it at such a big department level that it's now its own project. And then Gateways to Completion is a bigger initiative that is outside of Affordable Learning Georgia, where we're looking at the critical courses for students to take and for students to pass in order to graduate, kind of looking at transcript analysis, and then taking those courses and transforming them in ways that will hopefully enhance student learning. So we paired up with Gateways to Completion to say, okay, you're doing this project and you're transforming your course. If you want to move it to OER, to no cost or low cost materials, then also you can qualify for this grant. And so this one has a bit more priority because we want to make sure that we are working well with that initiative. So those are the 4 different types now. It's a little different than it used to be. We used to have different types that were like if you had OpenStax, then that was a different category of grants. But that didn't really change too much about the category. It wasn't a priority. It was just that some people had already knew they were going to use OpenStax textbooks, and so we had that as our indicator to OpenStax that people were using them, so that OpenStax could then talk to you and say, hey, how can I help? That's a little bit different now. We just have a little yes or no indicator for OpenStax, so we can just pull out exactly who is saying they're using OpenStax textbooks and not even have to worry about it being part of some sort of grant category? So yeah, just about all of them are no cost, low cost now, and then the other ones are just priority categories. And the mini grants are not within InfoReady Review. You'll see the application for those. That's a little bit different because we're not looking at, when is your starting semester, your final semester, how many students are you affecting. We're looking at what you're revising and what you're going to be creating. And so that is an entirely different type of application. With all of these projects, when you create something new under the grants, they are going to be under a Creative Commons Attribution license, which is CC BY, unless you have a more restrictive license that you're already working with. So let's say that you're revising a textbook that has some more restrictions on it. It's not just Creative Commons Attribution, but it also has to be non-commercial and it has to be share-alike so that if you create anything new with it, it has to be under that same license. That's fine because we're making an exception for those. But let's say that you created an entirely new set of lecture slides and sent them over. Those are going to be Creative Commons Attribution licensed. So everyone will be able to attribute those and bring them right back to the source, right back to the first time that someone made them, which were yours. And I guess CC BY is just the more flexible one. So more faculty might look at it and go, oh, okay, I could also use these in my course in a really cool way. And when it comes to revision, this isn't just fixing a few spelling errors or updating a few dates, adding a little bit of news into a political science open textbook. This is a major adaptation, a major improvement. So yes, accuracy, but we're also looking for accessibility revisions, for clarity. Maybe you're creating new multimedia to make things more clear to students. Maybe a design overhaul. Maybe you've got like this one Word document and it's kind of all over the place and you'd really like to bring it in and make it its own big open textbook. That could be a really good project for an OER revisions and ancillary materials grant. And yeah, new file formats. So for example, if you had it in a somewhat inaccessible PDF and you wanted to convert it into multiple versions, have it mobile ready, have it adaptive, like that's the kind of thing that you're looking for here. And ancillary materials are anything that's related to an existing OER that's going to support your instruction of the course. So a lot of times those are different types of media, a new video series, a new podcast series, narration added to lecture slides in order to help online learners. That type of thing is what we're looking for when it comes to ancillary materials. Funding is always the same. It's been the same since we started the textbook transformation grants in terms of the way that it gets done. It's not a direct stipend to the team members. It's not like a federal grant or an outside non-governmental organization grant. So this is not something where your grants office needs to address a whole bunch of indirect costs, things like that. This is more an allocation to the institution under a service level agreement that includes your proposal as the statement of work. And it says that this work is going to get done by this deadline, and here's exactly what's required, the final report's required, the semester status report's required, and those are all done through that one contract, that service level agreement. And just putting in again, be sure to include the $800 in that budget for the kickoff meeting, because that's important to make sure that that funding goes towards your travel as soon as possible. And funding is done in a 50% structure. This ensures a little bit of accountability on the team's part, and it lets us make sure that we are checking every single beginning and end of these projects. So that's what we've been doing ever since we first started awarding grants in 2014. All the grants offices know how it works, and now we have to have one invoice for the first 50% and another invoice for the second 50%. The reason why we're doing that is because the system office has moved to a 30-day turnaround guideline in invoices. So when they get audited for that 30-day turnaround and they see a service level agreement and an invoice for that agreement that's like a year and a half long, they get asked a lot of questions, and so they don't like us doing that anymore. So we do one invoice at the beginning and one invoice at the end. So if you're pretty well versed in textbook transformation grants, but it was from past rounds, then that's a new change for you there. The institutional sponsors are usually responsible for fund disbursement, but that depends on where you are and who you're working with as a sponsor. You might be working directly with the grants office. The department head might be working with the grants office for every grant that comes into the department. It depends on the environment that you're in. Especially in bigger institutions, this changes quite a bit. And because these budgets are supported by state funds, you do have to comply with state and Board of Regents institutional policies and procedures. The business office knows exactly how to do that. If you're working with them or with your grants or research office, that is something that will be very second nature to them. They'll know exactly what you can do and what you can't. For example, you're not able to buy food for a workshop because buying food is against the state guidelines with this kind of funding, which is tough because sometimes I would like to have an informational lunch for people and you can't do it out of state funds. So the proposal elements. For mini grants, it's a lot easier. It's just the Google form that's linked in the RFP, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is the Google form. This is actually the back end of it. I can just preview it to show you what it looks like on your end. Here is, the names, positions, institutions, email addresses. Here's the other team members. So here's, you're the project lead. You put this up here. The other team members you put in here. Here's the type of project. Sometimes it's a revision, sometimes it's ancillaries. It could be both, it could be other. You can type that in here. The final semester of the project, so we're not going to hurry you. We don't want you to end this in spring 2019. Have the last semester be in summer 2019 or fall 2019. That's when you'll be submitting the final report and the newly created and revised materials. The grant funding amounts, we define exactly here what the maximums are. The currently existing resources, so having a link to those resources really helps. If you're revising some things that you have and you haven't provided them outside of D2L in the past, it's tough for us to get the context of what it is you're going to be revising. So if you can at least get that on Google Docs and have a link that's accessible to us, that can help out a lot. But most of the time you're going to be making it for a currently existing OER. Just put that out there and we'll know exactly what you're talking about. The project description, so this is in lieu of the transformation action plan and the quantitative and qualitative research things that we look at in the big proposals. This is more about here is how you're going to get your work done. These are a lot more individual than the more team-based textbook transformation grant applications. So this is a bit more open-ended. The timeline and personnel, so this is a breakdown of your major milestones and what each person will be doing on the project. For example, you might have an instructional designer and an instructor of record on these projects. And that's great, but we might not know that the primary author is going to be the faculty instructor, and that the project manager or the graphic designer is going to be the instructional designer. It's different in every group, so this is where we get both of these here. And then the budget, this is once again just the breakdown of what you're asking for in the proposed grant funding amount. So this is looking at what your timeline is, looking at what the personnel, who the personnel are, how does this all work out in your budget? And then you accept that, yes, there are some terms for the open license that you're going to put them under, with exceptions for modifying pre-existing resources that have different licenses. Like if you're modifying a CC BY NCSA open textbook, obviously we can't just change that into a CC BY licensed textbook unless it's your own. So in that case, we would have to make exceptions. But if you're just making something new, then it's going to be Creative Commons Attribution licensed. So that is the application form for mini grants. And if you're interested in mini grants at this point, feel free to send a question into the chat and I can answer those for you. I'm not sure what everybody is going to look at right now, but okay. Oh, I see someone is typing a message. This new interface in Skype has been really nice in letting me know, letting me share the screen. It's way more efficient there, and also letting me know when someone's sending a chat message. In WebEx, it just used to surprise us all the time. It's really nice to get these questions. Okay, ancillary materials must be for ALG funded materials only, correct? No, you can make ancillary materials for other things. So yes, the creation of new ancillary materials for ALG funded OER, that's a big part of it. But it is a little bit more open-ended if you have a good reason to do it. So for example, there were a couple of projects that created some new ancillary materials for OpenStax textbooks. Sometimes they remixed the textbook for their own thing in a previous project. Sometimes they are just making them as new resources to be shared out there. And that's usually okay. It'll really depend on kind of the makeup of all of the applicants. Obviously, it would be more towards our strategic goals to enhance the materials that are already funded by us. But if you are making some ancillary material revisions for OpenStax or something like that, that could qualify, so long as you've got a really good explanation of why these are needed, that there's nothing else out there like it, and what you're going to be doing. I hope that that helps. Okay. So for mini grants, that's it. For standard and large scale, it's a little bit different because in the past, we've had an online application, and that online application really hasn't lined up with what we wanted it to look like. We can't really explain as much on the application as we would like to. So what we have you do is keep a Word version ready and kind of work on the Word version for your proposal. And that's where you're going to be doing most of your work. And then when you're ready to officially submit it, then you go to the online application. We are just waiting for the Georgia Tech Center for 21st Century Universities to launch it, but I will give you both a preview of that application and the Word version of it. So in here, you will get a link to the Word version, the proposal form and narrative. So if I do that, I will just download it, and so then I can show you right here. And I will get you a better view on this. Here we go. And yeah, that should be fine. I will zoom in a little bit more so that you're able to see it. There we go. So this, it would be an easier walkthrough than when we go through the online form, because there's so much text to explain why it is that this field exists and what we need. When you are going through this, you can read the italic text, and when you don't need it, just get rid of it. You can delete it after that. We don't need any of the italic text in there. We know exactly why these fields are needed and what needs to be included. We're trying to define the difference between an applicant and submitter on the Word document a little bit more now. This had been a stumbling block in the past. Some applicants are the people who submit the application. This is the usual thing. But in some institutions, there are grants offices that say, we would like to submit every application on your behalf for any grant that's out there. And that's fine too, but we want to know who the applicant is in terms of the person who wants to be the project lead, and who the submitter of the application is if they're not necessarily going to be on the project team. So we have it broken out by applicant name, email, phone number, position, and title, and then the submitter name, email, phone, and position and title. So we try to define it up here. Like if you're going to be the project lead, then that's the applicant. The submitter is the person who's sending in the application. They can be the same one, and in that case, just leave the submitter fields blank. But there are instances in which you may need the submitter fields where somebody else is submitting it for you. For team members, this is different. We used to have a big open text box, and that's not what's going to happen anymore. Now we have team member name, team member email address. We'll know through the proposal who these people are, but this is especially made so that when everyone is awarded grants, we can get a list of everyone's name and email address, and we can contact people very quickly after the grants have been awarded. Before, it was a lot of interpretation of those texts and then typing in entirely new fields in Excel. This time around, it'll get done in the application process, which is nice. And then if you have more than 8 team members, which hardly ever happens, you can put their names and email addresses in this text box. And then if you want to have a separate sponsor, then this is the name, the title, department, institution, but be sure to have at least the person who is writing your letter of support. That is going to be your sponsor, so all of the information on them goes in here. The project information, impact data, so the title of the project, if you've applied in the past, you know that the title of the grant project doesn't really matter too much. What we'll be doing is deleting that and replacing it with the number of the grants in terms of the order in which everyone's applied over time. We're now in the 300s for that. And that gives us a very easy reference number, so whenever you have a question, you can ask it and we can find your project very quickly. Even if you come to us 5 years later, we might be, oh, okay, well, that English project at Dalton State. Well, okay, we know that that was a thing, but if you say, okay, well, it's number 232, well, then we can go back, find 232, and go, okay, so here's all the information that we need on that. So we do change that title. So you don't have to worry about it too much. You don't need to make a really catchy title with a subtitle and all kinds of stuff. It's going to be deleted by the time peer reviewers get to see it. The type of grants, so here, most of these are just going to be no or low cost to students' learning materials. If you're in any of the priority categories that the RFP outlines, then it's specific core curriculum, scaling up OER, or gateways to completion. The requested amount of funding, that is the amount of the grant that you are putting in here. The course names and course numbers, so this is usually just going to be one course name, one course number if you've got a standard scale project. But if you have more than one course, that's where you're putting them in here. You do something like English 1101, and then the title would be Composition 1, and then you do English 1102, Composition 2. That's how we know what it is that you're addressing. Final semester project, just like with the mini grants, is going to be either summer 2019 or fall 2019. And throughout these rounds that we're going to have, we want to make sure that we're giving you at least a year in each one. This is going to be very different from previous years. So if you're applying in a rounds where the application round is in the spring, you'll have till the next spring, even though that's in the next fiscal year. So that's a nice thing. Before, if you were applying later on in the fiscal year, then you had a very small amount of time to get the project done. Now that's not a problem. And then there's all of the impact data. So average number of students per course section affected by the project, then the average number of sections affected by the project in a year, and then through a little bit of multiplication there, the total number of students affected by the project in a year, and this is all on average. And then we do it per semester too. The reason why we're doing this per semester is so when you start the project, when you say, okay, well, all the materials are implemented in this semester, we know exactly how many students that affects on average in that semester. So we can start tracking how many students are affected and provide some really accurate metrics as to how much your course has saved students over time. So we'll know that in like summer 2019, if that's your final semester or that's when you're first putting all of your materials in the course, then we know to start tracking your savings in summer 2019, and we know how many students approximately are going to be in there. Fall and spring, same thing. The title and author of the original required materials, so we're getting into the amount that you're saving each student here. This really helps us with finding the textbook later on. I went through and did a textbook price check on every single application, or every single awarded application, to make sure that we had up-to-date numbers on that. And that's how I do it. I go in, look at the title and author of the original materials, and see what they're charging for it now. So the original total cost per student, usually you want to use the bookstore price for this. If the bookstore is not disclosing this, or they only give it to students, then you can look up the retail price for it. But usually at an institution, you're going to be able to see what it is, what the price is that you're adopting for the old commercial textbook. The post-project cost. This is usually $0, but if you're going to use a low-cost platform like WebAssign, or you're going to have each student purchase one paperback title that that can't possibly be open licensed for a literature class, but it's like $8, so that's their post-project cost. That's where this goes. The post-project savings per student, that's the original cost minus the post-project cost, and that's where it is here. The projected total annual savings per academic year, so this is the total number of students per academic year multiplied by the savings estimate per student. And then there's just a yes or no of, are you using an OpenStax textbook? If you say no on this, and then later on you say, well, after further evaluation, we're using an OpenStax textbook, that's totally fine. That's not against any of the rules. You would just let us know so that we can get you in contact with the OpenStax folks, and so you can get additional instructor materials from them. And so that's all the information stuff, the information block of the application. Then there's the narrative section. So the narrative section has a few parts to it, and we're really outlining it here in the Word document. Over on the online application, this is where you do not have the same type of descriptions. There's just no easy way to put those in the notes at InfoReady. So here on the Word document, you really want to work this stuff out. So the project goals, of course, in a textbook transformation grants project, you're looking at saving students money. But that's not the only thing, and you definitely don't want to have the goal of, we're going to do this thing. We're going to replace a textbook, or we're going to create this new set of videos. The goals are more, what are you looking for in terms of student success, in terms of pedagogical transformation? Like, this is more about the stuff behind the why are you doing this. Statement of transformation is about why this project needs to happen. How is your institution doing when it comes to this course? How many people are applying? Are there unique characteristics of these students that are applying for this particular, or who are registering for this particular course? Is there anything interesting about the drop-fail withdraw rates or DF rates as opposed to other courses within your institution? Is there something that kind of marks that this is very critical for a particular major? That's where all of this goes. And if you want to talk about the efficacy of a particular technique, that's where this would go too. This would be your literature review space too. Your transformation action plan is about what's going to get done. So this includes the different roles that are going to be distributed in the project. So you may be an instructor of record, but you could also be the primary author on the textbook. You could also be the graphic designer for a new set of lecture slides. You really want to make sure that you're outlining the roles everybody has within the plan. If you are looking at using existing OER, a way to make you stand out in this project would be to define what it is you've already looked at and what you're considering. This way, the peer reviewers know that you've done some work already on this and that you're really trying to dig into more of the advanced stuff as soon as you get awarded. This kind of brings it into a successful project would be more feasible if you've already had some of this work done. So this is a way to kind of stand out in the crowd, and we put this here in italics too. Any course redesign work, so do you have to do some new changes in D2L? Do you have to align your resources to a new curriculum? Do you have to make some big changes to how accessible your materials are? This is kind of departmental work too. We're going to have to meet and decide on exactly what you're going to approve. That goes in here. And then the plan for providing open access to the new materials. This used to be a very critical part of an application when we used to not have a repository. Now we have a way to both store and provide discoverable access to materials, and we can attach Creative Commons licenses right from the repository. It's a great tool to have. But back in the day, we just had to know where you were going to put them because we did not have a place. Now, if you're going to put them in Galileo Open Learning Materials, great, then we can list it there. But if you're going to use another platform also, like you're going to put everything up on a wiki or on GitHub, then let us know here that those are also going to be places in which you're going to keep them. That's something good to know. Qualitative and quantitative measures, pretty self-explanatory, but be sure to define each measure that you're going to use and why. Some groups just say we are going to do a survey of some sort, and then we're going to look at this, and that's it. You want to be as detailed as possible here. Peer reviewers are very critical of the quantitative and qualitative measures part of this. And be sure to define if you need institutional review board approval. This depends on your campus, how this works out. But it will guide you a little bit later on, because once you get awarded, then you're going to have to run your measures by the Institutional Review Board if you need to. Sometimes there's a rule that says, well, if you're doing institutional research, it's exempt already. If it's anonymized, it's exempt already. But others will say, well, that's probably going to be exempt, but you have to run it by us. That depends on your institution, so you'll have to get in touch or at least read the guidelines for your IRB and outline them here in quantitative and qualitative measures. The timeline is pretty self-explanatory, but I would like it in a bullet point list if possible. Tables can mess up info-ready review a bit, but this would be your major milestones. So when are you starting the creation of it? When's that going to get done? When are you going to have a pilot if you are having a pilot? When are all of the materials going to be in for your final semester? When's the final report going to be created? That's all in the timeline. Budget's the same thing. Bullet point lists are really good for that. But have your budget reflect the roles that everybody is taking on, the materials that you'll need, the 800 in travel funding, and keep all the funding guidelines from the Round 12 RFP in mind. Sustainability plan, we're making sure that this doesn't just fizzle out after your final semester is up. Having some sort of plan for the updating of course materials, little basic updates, like if you're doing a course that's heavily based in news articles from the past year, yes, there will have to be some updating of those materials. Any possible expansions, if you have a department that's really interested in scaling up later, that would be a place to put it here. And just a little bit here on the letter of support, who it needs to come from. And if you have a multi-institution project, you need to have multiple letters of support. We just don't want your administration coming back to us and saying, they never told me they were doing this project. That's what the letter of support is all about, that you have the support of your administration to get this done. So this is what the application form will look like on InfoReady Review. It's a lot more bare. You're going to be copying and pasting over from the Word document. And so we can only really do spaces for 4 team members here. Additional team members go in here. Sponsor name, title, department, just like that. Original required commercial materials, that's the title, the author, the price. Here are all the numbers that we talked about before and whether or not you're using an OpenStax textbook. There's the project goals, statement of transformation, action plan, measures, timeline, budget, sustainability plan, just like we had on the Word document. The letter of support you can put right here. If you want to put the Word version in, you can do that here. Yeah, I would put it in. It is now going to be required just in case something goes wrong with this application form. But yeah, be sure to include the Word document here. And if you want any other email addresses for people to be informed, let's say you have a department head who's not your sponsor, but they need to know about this, add it right here. And then there's just the acceptance that, here's how grant funding works. It's connected to the SLA, the required activities, and that the funding is connected to whether or not those get done. And then you would just hit submit application. If you're done, you can always save it as a draft too. And another great thing about this is once you're done, there'll be a little PDF button up here. You can click on that to print it out if your grants office needs a printout of exactly what you submitted. It's a really easy way to get a printable version of the online document. So that's a look at both of these. Before we did some screenshots, but that wasn't too big of a thing. So peer review is a part of the standard and large scale ones. We select an entire pool of peer reviewers who have experience both in reviewing grants and in OER and with textbook transformation grants. You may have seen these calls for reviewers before. They're a different group each round. If you've applied before and you're like, what the heck is going on with this reviewer? You're going to get 3 new reviewers in the next round. And we go through the Georgia Institute of Technology for honoraria, and they manage InfoReady Review on that side. There is a rubric. It's on the online application. It's also linked in the RFP. It's different from what it used to be here. So before, it used to be a little bit more open-ended, almost kind of blank. But now we have it weighted. The transformative impact is really important. The organization, the planning is really important. The measures are very important. And it needs to be clear and aligned, but your budget being listed and clear is not going to be as important as the transformative impact of the project. It's weighted differently. It's all important stuff, but we really wanted to reflect exactly how important different components of the application were. So that is why. The rubric is both on the RFP and in the online form. So we already went through this stuff. This is just older stuff. But once you do this, once you get onto InfoReady and you create an account, you're going to, if you're at Georgia Tech, it's really easy. Otherwise, you're going to be clicking on register, create a little email address account. You confirm it on your email address, and then you have to go all the way down to the textbook transformation grants because USG is down at the bottom. There is a paste for Word button that is very helpful. It makes your stuff a lot more readable when you're pasting it from Word. I already went through all of this, so that is not a problem. I already defined all of that, including this and this and this. Yes. And so once you submit it, you will get an email that says we received your application. That's good. Then once we have evaluated it for completion, and that's usually me, we'll say whether or not it's accepted. That doesn't mean it's been awarded. It means it is ready for peer review. If you send it in early and I find that there's something missing, I'll send it back to you and say it's declined. That just means you revise it and you send it right back. So that's why it says it's been accepted. So after that, there will be on the notification day an email that says whether or not it's been accepted or it has not been accepted. If it hasn't been accepted, you'll get administrator feedback and you'll get all the peer review feedback. If it has been accepted, I'm going to try to include the peer reviewer feedback this time around because people found it useful even if they were accepted into the project. So all of that said, let's just look one more time over at the RFP, which I will just go here and go to the timeline. I do not know how this came up as July 23rd. This is supposed to be July 25th. So that is why I was a little bit late today. Sorry about that. And thank you so much, David, for letting me know. But the applications need to be submitted by September 10th. And this is September 10th at midnight, not 12 a.m., but 11:59 p.m. on September 10th. Peer reviews will be starting on September, well, 11th really, and go until the 24th. The notification date will be on the 28th. That means peer reviews happen, then I run it by the administration, we look at all the applications, and then we make a final decision. The difference here from previous rounds is here's the notification date on the 28th. The kickoff meeting is not until October 29th. That is deliberate because in the past, grants offices and project leads have found it really tough to get all the travel funding together to go to Macon right after they've been awarded a grant. We really like to have that kickoff meeting as soon as you're done with the grant notification process, but we really thought it would be a little bit better to get everything officially lined up before you get started. So now the kickoff meeting is going to be a little bit after, on October 29th, and that is the right date as opposed to this webinar. So the funding details are on here too if you ever have any questions from your grant office on how these work. Most of the details are going to be right in this RFP. So does anybody have any questions on the application process or the RFP at this point? I'm looking right at the chat box in the other room. In fact, what I will do is I will stop sharing my screen and bring it right back to chat. Can funds be used to pay students? This depends on your institution. We tried to make it as clear as we could that students can be on the team. Both faculty and professional staff can be. Students can be involved in working on aspects of the project. That's part of the funding details, but we can't tell your institution, yes, you can pay a grad student to be your editor or something like that. That has to be run by your institution. But we will not say, oh no, they're using a student. That's a problem. In fact, there are open pedagogical practices where entire classes might be building this collective OER and getting really into the higher stages of Bloom's taxonomy in the process. Like, that's really cool. We would never want to dismiss that. So funds can be used to pay students, but it depends on the institution. Thank you. David says, can a round 12 grant be used for a fall 2018 course? So it can be used to start on a fall 2018 course, but the course can't be your final semester, because this stuff is starting pretty well into this this upcoming fall semester. But if you started implementing it in fall 2018 and then you gathered some extra semesters of data, you did some revisions based on the pilot implementation, that's totally fine. That's something that we've seen before. Oh, no problem. I mean, the more data, the better. So if you really wanted to, like, let's say that your project can end in the summer, but you wanted to see how big it would be in the fall, you can totally move it over to the fall of 2019 and say, okay, we've got 2 semesters of implementation. That happens all the time. It's part of our tracking. And thank you very much, Don. And thank you all for attending. We got out just about on time, thank goodness. Thank you, David, for alerting me to the difference in there. That 3 was supposed to be a 5. I was supposed to have this webinar on Wednesday, and I just found out that I was going to have it today. So I think that I got you through everything. If you have any questions, feel free to send a message to me at jeff.gallant@usg.edu. I'm typing that right into chat for you. I am especially connected to my email inbox. If you find my phone number here at ITS, that's great. You might catch me in the office, but I also travel and present and things like that. So I will get your email much quicker than I will get a phone call most of the time. Plus, if you give me a cold call, I may have to be like, I'll email you later with all of the information. Anybody else? All right, thank you so much for being here, for dealing with a bit of a time issue, and I hope to see a project proposal from you soon. Thank you so much.